Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. And if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And it is in the inside. I was thinking today, that I really do delve deep and I'm really conscious about how deep I go because the whole idea for me is to stay balanced and to be the evidence for others that, that maybe in some of those things that I practice, those things that I delve into that lots of people they don't want to delve into, to resolve these problems. So they just don't tag along with us, in our lives, the monkey on our back. Is that what they call it? We're just always struggling with stuff and we know where it comes from, but we kind of push all that stuff off to the side. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be reminded of these things. And so we don't do anything about it. And then we not grumble and complain, but we stress ourselves out and we put ourselves in these moods, right? You put yourself in moods. And this is over and over and over again. And so it's really important for me to be that evidence for others that if you can resolve, and it's not even just resolving, right? Because lots of times you can't resolve, right? You can't resolve the problems. You can't talk to people where your problems were kind of those wires were all entangled and stuff, that those people might be gone, right? And you get bullied in elementary school. I know people do, but what are the chances that you're going to track them down and explain to them what they did to you? And would they really care in the end, right? Because this is your life, your problems, right? For you to resolve. They've got their own issues and they probably got bullied in their own life. And if they didn't get bullied, there was some other aspect of their life that brought them to the point where they felt that they had to bring somebody else down. And unfortunately, right, when you are around, right, when you are mixing with other personalities, when you're rubbing up against people, and you can think you're the nicest person in the world, right? But to somebody you might just be the worst person in the world. And this is a truth. This is a truth that I really, really had to come to terms with, because in my own experiences, it was always, what did I do? Right? I was so nice. I was so kind. I was the best friend ever. I didn't mean that. I was just pointing it out to them. And then to have friendships dissolve in front of your face, right? And it has happened to me over and over again. And it doesn't matter if I'm a good person or if I perceive myself to be a good person, somebody else is not going to. This is a lesson I learned very, very early in one of those really dynamic relationships that in most families is super important. It's vital sometimes, even for our own survival. And some of us don't even survive it, right? And that's a truth. You can just look at the news. You can look at documentaries of, the issues with fentanyl, right? That you can see all these beautiful souls trying to wake up, and they wake up and they look at the world and they experience the world sometimes for a decade or two before they crash in their own existence, because they don't want to look back and see why they have these issues, why they got to this point. Do you know how heavy I've delved into the mindset of obesity, in the mindset of impasse and narcissism? Today, I was in the topics of borderline. For those of you who don't know, my mother was a borderline. And these are really, really difficult relationships to keep whole, to keep in a state where you're not going to rub them well, because it doesn't take much sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just the look. Sometimes it's you not giving the look, not hearing, right? Not paying attention. And then we find ourselves in these hairy, scary moments that we had no expectations, no idea that was showing up, even in our own hypervigilance, where we're usually sitting nicely because, right, this is what we do. We pay attention to the world, we pay attention to other people and their emotions. But do we pay enough attention to our own emotions? And this is where I come in, right? I find that I sit very well in the topics of dynamic families, because it was where my problems laid. The answers, even to my problems, the solutions, right? And the acceptance of my part, right? Instead of always pointing the finger, I'm a nice person, why don't they like me, right? Understanding, we truly don't understand the other person, right? We only see and experience what somebody is willing to share. Now, being highly sensitive, being empathic, sometimes we read into that, but we can get ourselves in trouble in just doing that because, right, we want them to open up. We want to resolve those issues for them. And when you see it so clearly, right, you want to express it like a friend, like a family member, like somebody who cares. But because we don't truly understand that person, even if they are family and friends, we don't show our true selves. We don't show what makes us weak, right? We don't want to show our weaknesses. And so we don't. And so when somebody sees something and they want to resolve it and they bring it up, right? Those are where the difficulties can lay. You can get that mind your own business, right? Or that's not true. What are you talking about? Right? And it's only in those caring actions. And, when we get those kind of reactions, lots of times we shut down, right? Okay, I'm not going to offer my help. I'm not going to be that person that's going to sit there and listen and, right, be that person that cheerleads somebody else, because it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. We sometimes rub people badly in that. And what that does, in that repeatedness of being blasted or ignored or losing those relationships, sometimes that we give up in giving our opinion, having that voice, being seen and being heard. And that is a true injustice. It's painful. Yes, right? Being that truth teller, that's painful. But sometimes, when you really care and a little bit of information is I was going to say gonna hurt, but it is gonna hurt. But what I was meaning to say, it's gonna help. You can't help but voice that and express that. And, right? And you're going to get shot down for that sometimes, but that information is there now. Maybe you're not that person to resolve, or that person that they want to hear that kind of advice from, but you got it out. You got that. It's a seed, right? You got that seed out. And even though that relationship may be cut off in that moment, that seed is there, right? It might be deep, but in our experiences in life and the problems and the issues that arise from our problems, that over a while, right? Maybe they'll say, "Oh my goodness, Joan was so right when she mentioned that maybe that might be a possibility." Or when Joe gave me that advice, I should have listened to him, right? Now, doesn't matter that Cindy might have said something 10 years ago. That's not the point. Cindy just laid the seed there. And other people and other experiences, slowly, maybe quite abruptly, maybe it's like the next week or something, when that idea and that frustration is still in their system, that they have that revelation of, oh my God, right? That relationship might still be broken because, we're human. We have that pride. We don't tend to say, "I'm sorry," right? "I'm sorry I hurt you," right? "I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry that I stopped talking to you," right? "I'm sorry we lost contact." And we could really help each other in that, because that person received a gift, and in that realization, if they were able to express that somehow, maybe if it's a family member, they can mention it to a sister or a brother, and maybe they could say, "Oh, right, so and so, said that you mentioned something a couple of years ago about this, and they've been thinking about it lately, and they mentioned you, right? And they had such kind thoughts for you and stuff." Like, it might be 10 years later, but can you imagine the warmth in that? That warmth in that, because we second guess ourselves, right? When we lose people in our lives, when we get people upset. And like I said, we never know what it is we're going to say or do that's going to get somebody upset, just for the fact that we truly, right, don't know them. And it's not our fault, right? We get as close as we can. We get to know our friends and family the best that we can. But in life, right, we don't always express, we don't always share everything. And this is the case in my family, right? My sister, Carolyn, my youngest sister, ended up in the hospital last night. She's going to be there for a few days. She had fluid around her heart. She got pneumonia or cold or something, and that congestion stayed, and it turned into something that could have possibly caused her lots of problems, right? Lots of problems. But it makes me think that sometimes we are so stubborn that not only do we not talk to the people we care about, like, "Oh, my knees are hurting today," right? And then it turns out to be arthritis. Or somebody says, "Oh, I've got such bad indigestion. I've had this indigestion for the past 3 days. I never get indigestion, right? But you don't say anything. You just keep it inside, right? But maybe your mother or father, or your sister or brother know the symptoms of a heart attack and, can get you in to see somebody and possibly, right, save you from a heart attack, possibly even save you in your own life, right? Your whole life could be saved by that expression of what's going on in your life. I get it, right? Lots of us, we don't like to share because what we share quite often is used as ammo, right? It's very common, right, in this dog eat dog kind of world that we live in. And I don't mean to express it that way. It's only because I do delve deep and I listen to people. And people, for the most part, are looking out for themselves. There's a lot out there in the way of help, but you know just as well as I do that help comes with a price, right? It's a sale. I find what I find, and I make that movement in that little drummer girl attitude that I have because I want to find the best, right? Information out there that could resolve some of the issues, some of the misunderstandings, some of those ways that I live. But because I show up here every day, it's in my intent to share those lessons that I learn again, to be that evidence for other people, right? Be that evidence for other people. And this is what we should be doing with each other, right? With our family, with our friends. It's really hard when we don't share. And I couldn't imagine going through the experience of these past half a dozen years or so by myself, right? If I didn't have my live shows, if I didn't have my YouTube channel, right, that I would truly be just in here, right? I would be just in here and I wouldn't be expressing it, right? Too much in the outside, right? Because there aren't too many on the outside. When I say there aren't too many, I'm talking other souls that I connect with, that I consider to be friends. My friends are here. My contacts are here. The people that I care for outside of my family are here. I have very few connections, right, in my own physical world. I'm okay with that because I have always had those connections, right? And whether those connections were healthy or not, I thought they were. There was still lessons in all of it. Really, there were. And I'm not downplaying my life in any way. I lived my life to the very, and I live my life to the very fullest that I can live it in the state that I live, in my finances, in my lessons, and in my experiences, right? But sometimes, right, I don't share everything. And that's on me, but that's on me to discern what I bring to my platforms because not everything that is helpful for me would be helpful for the general public, right? Because I explore the inside and the outside. It is a mixed bag, but it's a slow introduction and it's in the baby steps. It's not about slapping somebody in the face with this piece of information that's going to direct their life in a way that's going to cause, right, a lot of disruption. But that's what change is, right? And as we get the information and as we get good information and the right information, we can make that better path for us in a way that maybe we can express ourselves. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. I leave myself open for these ideas to come across my path, but in that understanding that this is my brand and I'm sharing my experience of life, my lessons, all those seeds that were planted, the ones that, right, have surfaced out of the ground. Some of those have bloomed into flowers and trees. Some of them, right, might not have gotten enough sunshine and water, right, nitrogen, and, right, oh, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, right, and might not have survived. But that's on me because I discern what I bring to the table. I discern what I bring to the table for myself. I discern what I bring to the table in what I share, right? And I feel it out. I feel the experience and I feel the evidence in my own system. Like I really, really, truly do have to feel it before I can express it, before I can, right, start plowing the ground and sowing those seeds. Terminology I've heard online, but it serves, doesn't it? Because it is a truth that, in any conversation that we have with somebody, we have that opportunity to imprint, to influence. And I say influence like that because there's a difference between influence and manipulation. A lot of the work that I do right now is in resolving some of that information and some of those experiences that led me to believe something that was untrue, to believe it as being true for myself. And did I say that right? That something that was imprinted on me that isn't actually true, that I was able to, right, feel it out, delve into it, do that little bit of shadow work, going back into those painful experiences and really be a fair judge of what happened, right? So that those can be solutions and answers. Because if you resolved it in yourself, sometimes it is in just understanding what happened. It doesn't mean that the pain of it, the rejection of it, the abandonment, the betrayal, it's not like any of those can be resolved in the moment, because sometimes, right, those people aren't around anymore for different reasons. Sometimes in those experiences, you just got to understand that it's the evolution of mankind, right? That we just have not evolved to the point where we can be properly sympathizing with everybody, that we can have these kind of conversations with everybody, right? That sometimes we do have to be discerning about what we bring to the table in our lives, and if we're online, right? And it's hard work sometimes. And sometimes we second guess ourselves, right? Because we are not only delving in with our own experiences, right? We're looking out for people who have had the same experiences. And we have to listen to them. We have to feel them. If they're the same experiences, you have to see in their lives, because in their experiences, they might have the same problem, but because they had a different experience, right? It's not a problem for them. I better give an example on that one. Here's one. I have a hard time with the ask. It was the way that I was brought up, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about the family issues, right? Don't ask people for help, right? And this is the way that I was brought up. It was, right? It was difficult. And it kind of put me in that spot. Like, remember what I said? That over time, if it goes on over and over again, it kind of stops you. And I have a tendency to be self reliant, that lone wolf, that independent, that alpha, sigma, right? However you want to call it. And I'm not, right, because we put positive connotations on those titles too. But there's not a lot of that positive. There's a lot of that negative there. It's dirty work, right? It's heartbreaking work sometimes. But to get back to what I was saying about the ask, right? That it was always hard for me, right? Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much for popping in. But me and my sisters, we used to go to the telethon, the Jerry Lewis telethon. They used to have it every year in Vancouver. And they would just, it was like 24/7. And us kids, we would always go, and we'd go with our autograph books, right? And I would never ever get any signatures. And there were big stars. Oh my goodness. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. Oh my goodness. Mr. Rogers, Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin. Oh my, I can't even imagine. So many years. It was a tradition for us kids. It was something exciting to see movie stars and singers and actors and stuff, right? So we always, right, got our little autograph books, and we go and we just see who could get the most signatures. But I would never get any because I couldn't ask, right? I had been programmed, if you want to put it that way, not to ask for anything. Can you imagine me in class, right? Could never ask a question in class. Couldn't put my hand up and ask a question, right? Like mom say, go next door and see if you can borrow a cup of sugar. Oh my goodness, I couldn't do that. I couldn't Christmas carol. I couldn't go trick or treating, right? That was all something that wasn't resolvable for me. And even now, it's something that's right. And I try. I really do try. But it's not anything that, right? It's the way the program went. I got an important phone call to make to somebody official. If I can get somebody else to make that call for me, I will, right? So we have to remember all the time that, you know, that we end up with kind of traits that kind of hold us back in life, right? It's strange because in our experiences and because we all have different experiences, any kind of of direction is going to have challenges in that, right? Because we have had different kinds of experiences in our own lives from each other. It's one of those reasons that we do rub people wrong sometimes, right? Because we don't truly know that other ex- other person's own experience. And even if we think we know, right, it's not always the case. And we can ruin good friendships. We can become, uh, what do you call that? Disengaged from our family, right? And we can hold things against each other. And it's in just staying open, in just being willing, always being willing to be course corrected, right? To be able to sit and have a conversation. And in those conversations, right, sometimes there are opportunities that you can plant a seed somewheres that you could open up a topic and have somebody be open with you in that, right? But again, it's in that discernment. It's in truly feeling out people, feeling out the situation, the experience, and most importantly, understand somebody's past experience, not present experiences, because, right, lots of times we don't look at the past. We pretend that it doesn't exist. It never happened, right? And we move forward with all the problems that those experiences tagged on to us, sometimes for our entire life, right? I'm not giving up in the ask because I understand my problem. That sometimes, again, just understanding the problem can open up an opportunity to resolve the problem. Sometimes it just fizzles out on its own because you have that answer. You know that, right? Your whole life you've been triggered by this, and then you think about it for a while and you go, oh my goodness, it was because grandpa was in World War II and he got, post traumatic stress disorder. Or, maybe it's your father and, your father sometimes explodes in anger. But then you think, oh my goodness, he does that because that's what his dad did to him, right? But then again, you have to, right? In order to make those connections, you have to understand their past a little bit, right? Because that's sometimes where I make mistake. My mistake is because I don't know their past well enough, and that's because I'm not sitting and listening. I'm just listening to that moment of intuition that just says, "I got the answer. I got the I got the answer," right? But if you let that person talk, just in a regular conversation, and make them feel comfortable, that maybe you'll get that little bit of tidbit that go, oh my goodness, right? Okay. So if I want to help this person in resolving this issue, I'm going to have to be careful when I talk about this topic, right? And if you can't even bring up that topic or that person at all, how can we go about it in a different way, right? Can we use it in telling our own similar story, similar experience, and in telling our own story and our own experience that somebody can go, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me. And that's how she fixed it, right? And they don't even have to tell you their problem, which you know that they sometimes won't be able to because they might have, like me, been programmed in some way not to talk about their problems, or they heard that talking about problems is just going to cause more problems. But sometimes, in our experience and sharing that experience, they see their experience. And then that's the seed, right? And you haven't really done any sessions. You really, right? You really don't feel like you've gone down the ringer, that you've resolved something that's maybe not resolved, but you might have touched something that was 5 minutes ago untouchable, right? That you've planted something now that maybe somebody else can take over. Maybe their best friend, maybe a sister or brother or a parent, because the curiosity, that seed is in there, that maybe because they were taught not to ask with other people, sometimes within our own groups. And Sam Vatkin was talking about this the other day, that personal group. We have the in group, which is our friends and family. Then we have the out group, which are those the followers. And for me, I have to say some of my followers are in my in group, but my group is so small, right? I include them. And because we've been together for so long, right, that we've been kind of traveling along, like, right? It's amazing that we can travel together, walk down the road together, and share with each other and help make each other feel better and stronger, right? And more confident. These are the kind of people that we want to have around us, right? And it makes me feel good that I have these people in my life because, right? And I don't necessarily have to be in their presence, because maybe if they were in my presence, right, they might not love me as much as they love me in the moment, and I might not love them as much as I love them in the moment. Not because anything changed except for that physicality that sometimes, right, those wires that we get entangled with each other, right? And because we don't truly know each other, right? Even my own sisters, I don't know anything. My sister Tracy today phoned me about my sister Carolyn going into the hospital last night. And she's going to be okay. They're draining the fluid around her heart. She's going to be good, but they're going to just kind of watch her for a couple of days, right? But but my sister Tracy, she's very secretive about things, right? And she is one of those, I could take care of myself, right? But she almost died like 5 or 6 times last year, right? And she never told anybody that she was sick for days and days, until finally it was so bad that, she's in code blue in her own apartment, right? Because she's being tough. She doesn't want to bother people because she herself doesn't ask, right? She doesn't want to impose on people because, again, Sometimes we don't want to show other people that we're right, that we have soft spots, that we are weak in some aspects. We are all weak. We all are, right? That confidence is what makes us like this, right? And, sometimes it's important to be soft. We're supposed to be soft. We're human. We're creating the best human being we possibly can. We're not creating the best machine, the best computer. We're creating the best human being we possibly can. And we're all dynamic and we're all messed up. Sam Batkin just came into my mind. What was Sam Batkin saying? Um, oh my goodness. It was something very, very, the in crowd, right? The in crowd and the out crowd. So the in crowd is your family and your very close friends. And those are the people that you share. But those are also the people that you let your guard down with. Those are the people that you're truly yourself with. So if you're an old grouch, you're going to grouch at your wife, you're going to grouch at your kids and your friends and stuff. And we're just going to say, oh, that's just Uncle Joe, right? Unless you delve deeper and understand Uncle Joe was in World War II and has post traumatic stress disorder, right? Or maybe Uncle Joe had a very abusive childhood and he's got some post traumatic stress disorder, but you don't know unless this is shared. But because we're such fortune tellers, right? I got the answer, I got the answer, right? Instead of, and I am guilty of that, I get excited sometimes when I feel like I've got something to contribute. But if I contribute, right? And then, what's a good example of that? If I say, oh my goodness, right? Uncle Joe is a narcissist, right? Don't hang out with him. Get away from him. Stay away from him. And then it turns out it's only because Uncle Joe, and I'm not going to say only because it's still traumatic that he had post traumatic stress disorder because of World War II. And I have just done more damage to that relationship because now Uncle Joe doesn't get to see his nieces and nephews because everybody is avoiding him because they just think that he's a narcissist because he's always cranking and can't control his temper, right? So we really do gotta, right, use a little bit of discernment when we open our mouths, when we give that advice. And the reason of this whole conversation is, I wish, right, that we could truly have a voice and truly share in a way. And, I see people out there who are giving it everything they have, right? And they are being genuine in the character that they are, right? And, we can be genuine in that character because I'm a believer. If that is your character, that's who you are. Even if it's only part time, maybe that character's just when you go to work, or maybe that character's when you go to the bar with your friends, or when you get on stage to present, right? But that character is still you. You created it. It is a part of you now. My sisters, especially my sister Tracy, because she is very um private, right? She doesn't share a lot even within her own family. And again, I come from a dynamic family, and Even coming from a dynamic family, she had different experiences than I had, right? She was golden child. I was I was scapegoat. So our experiences would be different. So our experiences in this moment in time, how we interact with our people we surround ourselves, how we interact with our own experiences and our feelings, that they are going to be different, right? And we have to take that into consideration. I have to take that into consideration. And like I said, always leave myself open to the idea that these solutions for these problems that do need to be resolved, right? They do need to be understood. Like this lesson from Sam Vatkin, if I hadn't mentioned it here, right? You go like, who's Sam Vatkin? Right? And maybe you'll give it a little bit of Google, and maybe you'll go in and check him out. And maybe he's just the thing you need. But then on the other hand, right? Maybe he isn't. Maybe he doesn't rub you well, right? Maybe you think he's a complete idiot, right? But you won't tell me that because you won't want to hurt my feelings. And I won't ask you because that's not my business, right? Unless, right, we are in conversation and we are truthfully sharing with each other and open to other people's influence, right? There is a difference between influence and manipulation. I grew up with free choice. All us kids, my mom and dad, they agreed with each other. I'm assuming they agreed with each other. It was something they decided before we were born, that each one of us kids were going to be able to have free choice. And especially when it came to religion, because my dad was spiritual and my mother loved Jesus, right? But I am my father's daughter just as much as my sister Tracy is my mother's daughter, right? Scapegoat, right? Golden child. And I think, you know, it's a fair a fair reading on that. And when I say a fair reading, I believe that, probably my mother was golden child because she was the only girl, and she had like 15 years between her and her youngest brother, so she was like the only child too. And because I butted heads with my mother, right, there was no chance for me to be golden child. And being firstborn too, my mother didn't know how to be a mother. It was a lot of experimentation, it was a lot of trial and error. And in the way that we see that idea of being able to look into the past and then to be able to put myself in my own mother's shoes, who I always felt that she hated me, right? And yet I can sympathize with her through her own experiences, right? I can sympathize and I can understand why my mother, right, was the person that she was. But I would never say anything to her, right? And she would never ask for my opinion, or never, never, ever. And I wouldn't ask her because I didn't trust my mother with my safety, right? In fact, I didn't trust my mother very much at all. I was very afraid of my mother, very terrified of my mother, and I avoided her as best as I could. But she was my mother, and I didn't have much choice in that. But I did have free choice. And that free choice was basically put in place because of the religious and spiritual ideas, right? My dad wanted the kids to be able to make their own decision whether to believe in God or whether to believe in something else or whether or not to believe in anything. And I was pretty agnostic my entire life. Growing up, wholly agnostic. I knew there was something. But I didn't know what. I didn't believe in Jesus. Right? My mother ruined that for me because, right, she believed in Jesus and she was the person that she was. And I couldn't hand myself over to Christianity in that through my own experiences. Now, my experiences with my father were totally the opposite, right? He made up the best that he could, being also the person who couldn't ask, who couldn't put his foot down, who didn't get to have a say. Well, that's not true. My dad had lots to say. He did rule the house in that way. But my mother, right, she ran the household, and my father wasn't home very much. He was gone for months at a time, 2, 3 times a year at least. He had his own ways of coping, right, at home, and he was able to find his space as a commercial fisherman, right? Because he'd go off for months at a time. So he would get his breaks away from that dynamic family. And then when he came home, he worked the night shift as a cabbie, and he did the night shift. And so, he slept all through the day and then would go to work at night. So it would be avoiding all the hairy scary and the rubbing with each other, right? But you would never have known him. My dad never raised his voice. I never heard my dad yell once, except the boys who were chasing after my sisters, right? He would be pretty loud in that. But yeah, it's just passed down from one generation to the next. But to be able, right, to see the weaknesses in the people around us and to be able to empathize in a way, to appreciate that their experiences are different than my experiences. And even though I might have opinions on their experiences, because I don't know everything, that I would have to be able to sit in just a conversation, right? To be able to pull it out or to settle somebody's system down enough that they could trust to open up. But I would never ask unless, right, that was the like somebody was coming in and they were actually asking, right? If I had a client in front of me, they're asking for that, right? But to offer up, no. That would have pulled me back to some of those narcissistic tendencies, right? Coming from a dynamic family, my family had it all, right? Empaths, narcissists, borderlines. And it is in those dynamic families that we pick up traits from each other. And it's in our own choices that we get to decide whether to do a little bit of work, understanding that we picked up a little bit of crappy stuff from lots of different sources, that, or we don't. And we just have to accept that that's the way we're going to be for the rest of our lives, right? I haven't resolved the ask, right? My biggest problem, why it's taken me so long to achieve, right? I don't worry about it. I just hack away at it, understanding that in the baby steps, even if I can't do that part, I can do that part and I can still make movement in that. And I think that's true for everybody, right? It's just an understanding that, I don't think that that cruelty, that bad person vibe that I labeled onto my mother might not have been wholly, I'm not saying wholly true, but wholly the case, right? Because without me putting myself in my mother's shoes and knowing the whole story, right? And my mother would never express the whole story. And if she did, you could pretty much guarantee it wasn't going to be true. And there were going to be lots of parts missing out of the story. But again, those are the experiences that create the people that we are. And it's in our choices, right? And if you choose not to work on that, right? Go back and have those conversations if you can. Put yourself in your own experiences, like I've done, and to be fair in my judgment. You have to be fair in that. Judging is not a good thing, but it's something everybody does. It's everybody does. But if you're going to be a judge, be a good judge. Give an right, give a honest score, right? And you know, you might be able to see the people that you thought at one time were your adversaries, right? Because that's what I looked at my mother as an adversary, and find out that maybe they were just hurting, right? Hurting so bad that they were just looking for an outlet to relieve the pain. That's not giving excuses, right? Because there is no excuse for trauma that we inflict on others, right? But I think it softens the receiver enough to understand that, it's up to us. Are we going to carry it on? Are we going to, what my grandmother did to my mother, or her father did to my mother, that my mother did to me, that I would do that to my own children, right? I never had children. I have to look at that as maybe a miracle, because I didn't wake up to any of these ideas until maybe a half a dozen years ago. And yeah, my children would have had my mother, right? I rejected my mother pretty early in life, and I don't mean to laugh in that, right? But it happened, and I am my father's daughter, and my father, I wish I had an opportunity to put myself truly in my father's shoes. And my father would have been open. He would have had those conversations with me if he knew that maybe I might be able to absorb them and understand them a little bit, right? He would have had those conversations with me, right? But yeah. right? Better late than never for myself. And I can't cry over spilt milk, right? I'm not going to have those conversations with my father because he's been gone for a very long time now. But it does make me still, right, in that little bit of work for myself to go back and really look at my father as much as I looked at my mother, right? And understood that sometimes in my own fear and in the fact that I rejected my mother because my father would go away for months. And when I found out he was coming home, that I would be so excited and so happy, and he would get all of that, right? That maybe my father wasn't as perfect as I perceived him to be. Does it mean I loved him less? No, because I understood, right? My father was his father, and I am my father, right? It's just passed down from one generation to the next. And so, I see that maybe am I breaking generational curses? I don't know. Both my parents are gone. I'm not the evidence for them, but I can be the evidence for my sisters. I can be the evidence for my nieces and nephews, right? I can do that. I can be that evidence for the people that I bump into, strangers or not, right? And I can be that person for myself. And that's what I've been doing for, oh my goodness, it just seems like forever. And it seems like, every time that I feel that, I've got it, I understand it, right? Something pops up to say, no, you don't. No, you don't. Okay, you guys, I have no idea where that came from. I'm going to put the title of my card that I pulled tonight as the title. Oh my goodness. I might title it something different unless I can tie it into whatever card that I pull. If you don't know, it's 54 powerful words. They're just powerful words, 54 of them. And we're just going to pull a card. We're going to go into it. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. Maybe it'll be pertinent to the conversation, but I believe that 3/4 of the population conversation that I've just had is already dissipated from my brain, but I'll come into my live show and watch it for myself, right? Because I take my own lessons, because lots of times you get the lessons, but you don't get the lessons. Does that make any sense? It goes in there, it imprints, it does stick. But again, right? It's information, and sometimes it just sits there and we never go back into it. That's why it's important, right? To go back in reflection, right? Contemplation, shadow work. Okay, you guys. Commitment is your word to see it through. Oh my goodness. If you guys didn't notice, I changed my camera back to the camera that I had, because when I held the card up, I couldn't read the card in the camera because it was just all fuzzy and stuff, right? So we went back to the old camera. I am happy with it. It works for me, right? Commitment is your word to see it through. And I'm going to have to say my commitment is to show up here, right? Monday to Friday. You can always guarantee that I'm going to be here. It's in that company sometimes, right? And lots of times the topics are not going to hit, right? But sometimes maybe a sentence will plant itself in your system that maybe, right, you'll wake up tomorrow and you'll spend the day contemplating the topic in a way that you would understand, that you would feel it, because it's your experience of your experiences, right? And, you give your word, and I gave my word. I'm here. I'm here until I'm not here, physically not here. Is it going to change? 100%. Change is always happening. It's always happening. But it's going to be here, right? It really is. I'm going to see this through because I gave my word to myself, and you know, it's all I've got is that word to myself. And that's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth for any one of us. At the very least, it should be, because if you can't keep the word for yourself, right? You gave your word for yourself and you can't do that. Well, you should show up here a little bit more often, because I always keep my word to myself. Do I fail others? I do, all the time, right? And I will probably continue to. But I understand that it's in my intent. It's not my intent to rub people, but I do this, right? Rubbing shoulders with each other. It's not my intent to rub anybody the wrong way. But, right, I do show up and I do share in the movement that I make. And that's the truth. And that's what I'm committed to. And each one of us has the right, to decide for themselves whether or not to commit to whatever needs to be committed to, right? And yeah, I hope you commit to come and hang out with me tomorrow. Okay, you guys, I've been yabbering for too long now, and I want to make myself another cup of tea because I've been talking. I haven't even taken a sip here. It's going to be stone cold. I'm going to come in and I have to listen to myself yabber for an hour because I'm coming in to take the lesson for myself. Eugene, thank you for coming into my live. And for those of you who pop in later, put your feet up and hang out. I hope I didn't touch anything uncomfortable for you. It is not my intent, right? But if something got planted there, right, maybe it was meant to be coming to the surface. And when it does, right, feel it out. Feel it out. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. See you tomorrow.